A couple of people are finding out the hard way. The way life works in Canada isn't necessarily the way it works all the way around the world. 2:37, I'm Scott Thompson. Luke's in the house. And joining us will be Gary Derenfeld. Of course, you can find out more at yoursocialworker.com. This is an interesting story. Let me read you a little bit of this out of the Toronto Sun. Two Saskatchewan siblings in their early 20s have been barred from leaving Malaysia for allegedly stripping for photos on a sacred mountain last week in an act an official there believes triggered a deadly earthquake and landslide. So not only do they not like this sort of behavior, they do believe because of because this being a sacred mountain, that it actually triggered a deadly earthquake and landslide. Malaysian police have identified them, Lindsay Peterson and Daniel Peterson. I understand it's a brother and sister. Police accuse them and 3 other tourists from the Netherlands and Germany for breaking off from the tour and taking nude photos before being scolded by a guide. The photos were then pasted on the park's website, have sparked anger, outrage among some Malaysians for being disrespectful. The Canadian Foreign Affairs Department says it's aware of the reports of the 2 citizens, and here's their typical answer. They're providing them with services and blah, 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 blah. They've actually contacted the parents, the father. He doesn't know much about it all because he said, well, if your kids did this, would they tell you? So obviously he's a little embarrassed about the whole thing. But somebody from the park said that the earthquake was a confirmation of his people's beliefs. It is a sacred mountain, and you cannot take it lightly. Malaysian media report the pair could be charged as early as Monday. 16 hikers were killed in the 6.0 magnitude quake and subsequent landslides. Malaysia has some of the strictest censorship laws in the world, including restrictions on obscenity and sex in movies, TV, books, and the Internet. Some of the things that are banned: pornography, sex scenes, websites as such. Performers who are there cannot wear revealing clothing. They can't jump, shout, hug, or kiss on stage. Recently, an Avril Lavigne concert in 2008 was canceled because it was too provocative. Numerous other performances have had their shows axed, such as Beyonce and Keisha. Mariah Carey back in 2004 said cover up. Lots of people say that here too, though. And Linkin Park banned from wearing shorts on stage back in 2003. So that's the sort of country that we're dealing with. That being said, so a group of students go up to a very historical site, a very symbolic and sacred site, and instead of just I guess giving the location the respect that it deserves as per the guide, they decided to break away and then take some nude selfies. So there's a couple of things a couple of questions I have. And the first one is, what is it about a historic site that makes some people want to have a picture with it naked? And the other question is, why would they not have thought of someone else other than themselves? And especially if you're posting it to social media, specifically on the park's website, how could you not think that this would not be disrespectful? Because I would guess if you've gone to this, to the extent to go to a destination like this and climb to see a sacred mountain like this, that you would know a little bit about the history, certainly of the land you are visiting, the people who are playing host to you. Anyway, let's bring Gary Derenfeld in on this, see what his take is. He's with us now. Good afternoon, Gary. How are you today?
Scott, I'm good, and for the purposes of this interview, I'm keeping my pants on.
Okay, that's good. But remember, there'll be a picture at the end, so the option's still there for you. What is it about a sacred site that makes some feel the need to disrobe?
It's not the fact that this is a sacred site. It's that we are talking about still very young adults here. You know, there's a reason why insurance companies really don't lower the insurance for persons younger than 25. Right? Because they know
is this like
stupid.
Is this like mooning and streaking?
Yeah, honest to God.
It's the same thing.
Yes. These young persons felt a tremendous sense of satisfaction for having mounted the summit, for having climbed this mountain. And in their glee, this is their misguided thinking in terms of how they're going to celebrate and show the world how wonderful they are. They didn't think any further than that.
What? Yeah, so they never even had the discussion. I imagine when the guide went up and said, you're insulting people, they looked at them like a deer in the headlights of a car.
I would have to imagine. And, you know, welcome to cross-cultural issues. If you look at it through, if you will, a Western perspective, the response would be, so what's the big deal? However, that's not what we're supposed to do when we are being culturally aware. We want to assess these matters through the eyes of the other culture. It has nothing to do with whether we agree with it or disagree with it. It has to do with respecting the other culture's views when you're on their property.
Would this be any different than somebody doing the same thing in a place of worship here?
You know, I think I read that in one of the online comments about this, and I don't think it would be any different. I mean, if either you or I were to unrobe, undress, and walk into a church, a mosque, a synagogue, it would be seen as a remarkably discourteous, if not criminal act.
So why, you know, and I can certainly understand the mooning, the streaking, and wanting to do something like this in a spot like that. And the kids, I get that part. I'm not that old. I'm not that much of a prude. But why the need to show the rest of the world? Or is that a silly question because we don't do anything without showing the rest of the world?
Yeah, well, welcome to, 2015. You make your crazy accomplishment and you got to post it for all the world to see. And again, that's why insurance companies don't lower the premium for persons younger than 25, because they recognize they are still loaded with poor judgment.
So if you are an employer and one of your star young people have just done this, how do you react?
Yeah, good question. And so if I'm the employer, and back up just a moment, that's why we try to get it through to young persons, teenagers, young adults, children. Don't be putting this garbage up on the Internet, because it will inadvertently reflect poorly upon you by those persons who have greater wisdom and judgment. And so their employers are not going to be giving these young persons the high five.
Is this the only example that seems to work? For example, we remember the guy, the Hydro One employee, and what happened with the TV reporter and such. Is this the only thing? Because the respectful thing doesn't seem to jive. They don't seem to buy into that.
Well, it's not.
So is it like being a kid? Like, until you take away the toy, they don't get it. Until you take away their identity, their job, they don't get it.
Jump in. It's not that they don't appreciate the respectful thing. They just don't even think in that direction.
Yeah.
So they're not out necessarily to be disrespectful. They're just thinking from their own self-absorbed, idiosyncratic point of view.
So can we blame them?
So on the one hand, no. But on the other hand, how do we get a message out there that this is not the place to do that? Here in Canada, no, I don't think any person is going to think twice that you can't disrobe it, at a place of worship. Mm-hmm. But they don't understand the rules and the way the world is viewed from another culture, particularly when in place at that other place. So I'm worried that these kids may be used as an example of what not to do,
right? And
they may bear a consequence that, in a way, is going to be disproportionate to the offense. So I hope that doesn't happen. But on the other hand, when you're traveling in somebody else's country, know the rules and abide accordingly.
And I think that's probably where people may have some issue here. And again, I agree with you. You're young, you're full of P&V, you're going to have some fun. But how could you go to a destination like that and not know the culture, the history?
Right, and be so clueless.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, again, they're under 25, aren't they? And so even if, and this is the risk-taking nature of a teenager and young adult, that even when they may have some sense as to the impropriety of the act, the risk-taking part of them says, yeah, well, it's not that big a deal, let's still do this. The gain, the supposed notoriety, outweighs in their mind the associated risks. Well, hello, wake up.
So, in other words, if they just taking a picture of there in that environment wasn't enough, they wanted the thrill, the risk of, hey, let's do something we're not supposed to in a place we're not supposed to be.
Yeah, and by posting it on Facebook, boy, are they going to open themselves to retribution from the country, because the country is going to be concerned that other persons, now having seen this on Facebook, are going to act similarly.
Yeah. Well, they've said that. They said apparently there's, like, nude selfies at historical sites are on the rise.
Yes. So, how are we going to, or how would a country in that circumstance limit that? Just like, how did the reporter come back to that fellow, a few weeks ago or last month, who was so disgraceful to her on public television? Well, we're going to hold you accountable, and we're going to make what's the word I'm looking? An example of you.
Yeah. So, is this?
You're gobsmacked.
I am. I'm still. I'm trying to think if I would have done it.
Right.
And I remember being kids and mooning people. I remember doing that, but then there's something about the venue that had a lot to do with it. And again, you wouldn't go out and do that in a place of worship. You wouldn't do it at the War Memorial. You wouldn't do it at the Cenotaph. You know what I mean?
Right. So I don't think there are, quote, decency police out there on the mountain. But having said that, by capturing your own image and posting it to Facebook, you're providing the evidence against you.
So is this cheeky fun or disrespectful self-indulgence?
All of the above. It's not either or. And if there's a takeaway, if there's a message for young persons in this, you better know the rules of the land, and you better learn to discriminate really fast between cheeky fun and something so dangerously inappropriate to yourself.
What about the poor parent in this case? There's a quote from one of them, and he basically said that, if your kids did this, would they tell the parent? I mean, he's clearly embarrassed. How do you react if you're the parent?
Well, you know what? I was kind of at a loss to fully understand that, because I would think that if my child is being held in a former country, my child would want to get a hold of me ASAP as a source of support. And it seems that is not the case here. So either they're terribly afraid of the parent, or maybe they won't get the support, or I don't know. Wasn't that an odd response, though?
So we talked about this sort of behavior being on the rise. Now these people getting caught. And as you said, this could be quite serious. I mean, there's people that get lashes for stuff like this.
I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And I think, the days of this kind of Wild West mentality with the Internet, it has reached such a pitch that the world is starting to push back. And from my perspective, that's kind of a good thing. We'll see how they push back, but the pushback is a good thing. This is the world's way of saying, darn it, there really are limits. There really are limits. And when your act is so egregious, we will hold you accountable, and that will be a message that should and will reverberate through the entire world.
That being said, will it be a deterrent?
Well, I think these things do serve as a deterrent. I do. I would have to think that with time we're going to see a decline in those nasty comments to women reporters, and I think something like this may serve as a bit of a wake-up call to other young persons who think they can, get totally carried away It won't be a panacea. It's not going to resolve the issue for all young persons, again, only because they have that adolescent or teenaged brain.
I wonder if we will see more. I mean, you remember I remember being a kid and seeing the streaker at the Academy Awards. I remember one on an episode of The Tonight Show. For example, if the Pan Am Games were in town back then, there'd probably be one there.
I'm sure it's going to happen this year.
So will we see is this the new version of that?
Yes. I mean, we're talking about the new the Internet has opened up so much good, and it's also opened up so much bad, whether it's pornography, whether it's bullying, whether it's shaming, whether it's inappropriate exposure. And so our whole world is coming to terms with the negative impact of the Internet, as well as the wonderful good it does in terms of educating and bringing people together.
We got a minute or so left here. I wanted to ask you about a new form, and this is obviously I'm surprising you here. There's a new form of reality TV called poverty porn. And basically what it does is it's like the homeless selfie. It exploits those who are in a situation of need in order for entertainment. There's one specifically called The Briefcase, where they have these two families, both are down and out and behind the eight ball when it comes to their finances. They think that they're going to be doing a documentary on helping to fix the finances, and basically it's a game show. Each family is given $100,000 and then told the story of the other family who's more desperate than they are, and then we have to watch them struggle and go through how much they decide to keep or whether they decide to give some to the other family. I just felt dirty watching this. Is there anything to be gained by this sort of thing?
So you're speaking to a guy who had a reality television show for 65 episodes called Newlywed, Nearly Dead. And people would wonder, am I exploiting persons for the sake of that show? And is it really real? Is it in part made up? I can only tell you that those were conundrums I personally had to wrestle with and wanted to make clear to our producers that I didn't want to come across one way or the other as exploitive, and that I'm not going to be told what to say or do in my actions, that I want to act appropriately. And all of that was, from my perspective, respected. It doesn't mean that people didn't necessarily show their lesser selves, but that was them doing that to themselves, and I was there to help them. I think reality TV has shifted greatly in the last 10 years since when I began on that show. I think and it's not to say that it wasn't exploitive on some programs back then, but I do worry that it is increasingly exploitive, and that's troublesome.
All right, Gary Dierenfeld has been with us. You can find out more at yoursocialworker.com, and, of course, his parenting column in the Hamilton Spectator. Gary, thanks for the time, as always.
Great to be with you.
And thanks for coming in when the issue is even weird and wonderful as this one.
Final snapshot, and my clothes are still on.
There you go. All right, let's go. Turn the lights back on. Thank you, Gary.